Hi folks, I'm Siegfried Trent, game designer, co-creator of Everyday Heroes and Grammar Commando for Sig Trent Games. Today I'm going to update you on what's going on with Sig Trent Games in this week of 36 of our operations. I'll give you a little bit of game design advice, and I will talk about my life in gaming and in general. All right, we'll start it off with Shotgun Fantasy News. We'll just kind of go down by the things that I'm working on here at Sig Trent Games. So about 20% done with my editing process that I do before I send it off to another editor to go from first draft to final draft. So the parts that I focused on, I did the introduction because I had a little extra time for that, and it's pretty short. Then I went on to work on the parts that I want to move over into the Night Magics project, which I'll talk about in a sec. So those parts needed to be processed first, and that involves the rules for spellcasting, the general magic rules that support an overall system of spellcasting and spells, and all that kind of stuff that's going to be needed over there in Night Magics as well. So I focused on that. Definitely made some changes. There were some small but important parts of spellcasting that we were missing. I didn't formally talk about how DC values are determined. It's mentioned in some different places, but it didn't really have a section saying this is how that works. And I didn't have a section on how spell attacks work, which is also really short, but something that needs to be called out. And also refining talk about your spellcasting ability score and spellcasting ability modifier and how that works. And exactly what I was going to call it, because I think I named it like 3 different things while I was writing it. So I went and saw what 5e was doing with it and wanted to make it pretty similar to that, but there's a couple just little tweaks to the language and stuff. Anyway, did all that. I also decided to split up targeting. Originally I had targeting for spells, included a range, and then the type of targets that you chose, because these things seem to make sense together to me. But in the end, I ended up separating them because as I refined exactly how I want to make consistent the targeting information, the range information kind of clashed with it a little bit. And I'm always kind of looking towards how would I put this into a computer system. And I decided that ultimately range and the types of targets that you're choosing are different categories. So those became 2 stat blocks. So I went and changed the stat block of all like 97 spells that I got in there and the ones over in Night Magics. So that was a bit of work. And just tightened up the language on those and generally made that stuff better. So lots of little things go into the final draft to try and take it from, okay, I got all the ideas here, to let's make sure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed and everything is exactly the way it should be and makes sense and reads beautifully and all that jazz. And so whenever I do these parts too, I often end up rewriting a lot of sentences or just changing the focus or sometimes the order of presentation of things. And stuff like that. And I did some of that as well. So quite a lot of changes going on there, but nothing that really changes the content of the book. It's still the same stuff. It's just a lot better presented and easier to understand and more consistent. So that's what final draft writing is all about. All right, what else is going on? Night Magics, as I said, I busted that open again. It's been a little while since I worked in there, and I moved all the content over that needs to come over from Shotgun Fantasy. And it's very important that those things stay pretty close. I made the mistake of copying it first and then finding more problems and then having to change it in 2 places. And I was like, why did I do that? Don't do that. Try to finish all the text first, then move it over. I got kind of excited. And then I was reworking some of the spells to match the new templates. The templates in the 2 books will be just a little bit different because they are a little bit different types of magic, and the way we're approaching it is a little bit different. It's the same basic systems, just presentation. Night Magics is a little more focused on being generally 5e compatible, so it's going to include like the school of magic that would be in 5e for those. As where I decided ultimately in Shotgun Fantasy that really wasn't doing us any good in the book itself. People can kind of figure it out, because for 5e spells you're going to have to figure out the spheres for everyday heroes, and it's basically just making a judgment call and picking one out. So I didn't think it was best to include it here. I think it just could confuse matters because Shotgun Fantasy is so much kind of its own thing, as where Night Magics is a little bit more just straight additional material for these systems and a little bit less of a whole book and system all contained within itself, right? If that makes any sense. Don't know. Hopefully, when you read these books, it will make a lot of sense and they'll seem to be exactly what they should be. All right, contract work. I got a couple of contracts going now. My sort of medium-sized contract that I'm doing is going really well. I'm on task. There's a lot of words that need to get written. It's an aggressive schedule, but so far I'm keeping up with it. So that is all good. Even just a little bit ahead still. So that's nice. And I really like the stuff that I'm writing. I think it's really cool. I made a lot of random generation tables this week for it. That was kind of fun. I haven't done those in a while. I'm not big on random generation, but this book, it makes a lot of sense. They just kind of help you quickly, either as a game master, mostly as a game master, to come up with some stuff. But if you're a player, some of these tables could be useful too. Um, Again, I need to ask permission before I can really talk about the details of that. So I need to do that soon because we're coming up on the halfway point for that. All systems go. That'll be at the end of the month, and hopefully we'll meet our word mark there. I'm quite confident that I will, and that'll be excellent. Then we move on to the second half. Usually the first half is harder than the second half when the way these things go, because you just like by the time you're halfway through, you get a really good feel for where you're going and what you're trying to do and the style that you're going to do it in. Next up, I got a new small contract. I just read the contract details, and I'm going to be talking about contracts in a second. Not talking about this specific contract at all, but so looked good, and I'll be signing that soon and getting started to work on that. I believe I'll start working on it just at the end of the month here, and I'll finish it up through November because it's due in December, and that should be easy. It's really like a 1 or a 2 week project, and I'll have 4 weeks to work on it, so it should be no problem. Other stuff, nothing much to report. There are some, possibilities of some more work out there, but right now I don't need any more. I got plenty of stuff to write, so working on that. I do have some interesting thoughts about Shotgun Fantasy. I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and after we do the version for Everyday Heroes that's specifically meant as a supplement for Everyday Heroes, I may try to do a version of Shotgun Fantasy that is standalone, still using the Everyday Heroes rule system, wouldn't change the rules at all, but would just include elements for other genres and would include a really stripped down core section of rules and things like that. So we'll see about that. I'm not 100% sure, but I would like the hard work I did to be accessible to a wider market, and that would be a way to do that. So I'll be thinking about that. We call it like Shotgun Fantasy Complete, something like that. And maybe that's the best way to go if I'm going to do a print edition. Because, for marketing to PDFs and stuff, I'm going to be marketing to people that already play Everyday Heroes and know what this is going to be about. When you do books, you need to sell them to distributors. Distributors want to sell them to bookstores. And bookstores and game retailers are going to want some confidence that anyone who walks into the shop might be interested in buying this product. And if it's a specific supplement for a game that maybe they don't already sell a lot of or something, they're going to be kind of hesitant. But if it's a new game, they can at least kind of, as it were, roll the dice and take a chance on it, right? So I don't know. There's a lot that needs to be thought out to go in that direction, but something I have been thinking about this week. I think that's about it for news for Sick Train Games. Things are going pretty good. Never as fast as I might like, but not bad. Game design tip of the week. This is about contracting, since that was something I was thinking about this week while reading Contract. Contracting is also something that's pretty important to Sig Trent Games because, one of my goals is to have contracts that are really good for creative people. Most of the industry uses contracts that are mostly good for the company that's doing the contracting. I'm not saying that's bad, because people who are in the games business, generally speaking, are not making giant piles of money. They're not trying to be predatory. They're just trying to cover their butts because there's a lot of difficulty in the business, and you're trying to get every ounce of value as you can. So having really broad ownership rights, work for hire contracts and stuff is usually good for most companies because it just makes them free to do whatever they want with their intellectual property. But nonetheless, with Sick Trent Games, I'm trying to kind of set some slightly higher standards in a way, and so our contracts try to leave intellectual property partly in the hands of the artist. So the art and the work that they do themselves belongs to them, but we get pretty extensive rights to use it and to make money with it in any way that we see fit. But I also want them to be able to make money with it in other ways that aren't directly competitive to what I'm doing, or aren't going to sort of like dilute the quality of what I'm doing. But that's pretty broad because we have a pretty narrow audience, right? Anyway, but this is more about, as a creative person, and a little bit less degree as a company, the reasons that contracting is important. And this is mostly for kind of small guys. If you're a professional and you're already done a lot of stuff in the business, then you probably know more about this stuff than I do, to be honest. So let me start by saying I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. Why do people say that? A couple of reasons. There are laws against pretending to be a lawyer when you're not, and de facto somebody who is talking about the law then may seem to be a lawyer, so you have to say I am not a lawyer to make that really clear. And if you give people legal advice and you're not a lawyer, then you can be liable for them taking that advice to heart and going and doing something and getting in trouble, and they come back to you and why did you give me this terrible legal advice? So I'm not giving you legal advice, and I'm not a lawyer. All right. Why are contracts important? I think it's fairly self-evident, but let's go over some of the points. It limits disputes and arguments, right? So the last thing you really want to do is arguing with people about the terms of the work that you're doing or the work that you're getting from somebody else. It wastes everybody's time, makes people feel bitter. The whole world is better if we're cooperative, right? We're working together in a way that's mutually beneficial to everybody. And so having a nice contract that's really clear on the terms is going to help people avoid those arguments and bad feelings, right? So that's great. Keeps you from doing the wrong thing. So it's really easy to play a game of telephone and, oh, I'm supposed to do this, and then you do something and it's not really what somebody wanted. But if you've got a contract and it lays out the terms and what's desired, then it's nice and clear, and you can say, hey, look, I read the contract, this is what it says, that's what I did. Like, if we have a problem with that, then we got to talk about it, but I did what I was obligated to do. And if that's not what you wanted, then you should have said something else, right? Hopefully you can try to work that stuff out anyway, but it's nice to have that written down, that everybody signed it and everyone supposedly read it, so that you can be happy and move on with your life. Helps protect you from mission creep. So this is kind of a similar thing if you're creative. I've seen it many times where someone asks for something and then they're like, oh, but I'd also like this, and I also want that, and I also want this thing, and I expect to get this. Well, yeah, those need to be agreed upon ahead of time when you're deciding whether it's worth the money that's being offered, right? So when you're exchanging work for money, you have to make sure that we understand what the work is and we understand what the money is, and that those are equitable. And if you want something more, it's naturally probably going to cost you a little bit more money. All right, clearly lays out expectations. That's really important to know when things are going to be due, what quality standards they have to be, that there's no AI involved, that kind of stuff. So really important to get all that figured out so that everybody's on the same page, right? And finally, if you ever wind up in such a disagreement that you end up going to court over things, then having a written contract in your hand, you can say, well, this is what was agreed to, and this is what I did, is going to go a long way to protecting you, considering if you are on the correct side of the matter, right? Okay, so those are reasons that a contract is important. Some notes about contracts. This is like a general category of stuff that I think is either interesting or important. So contracts can take many forms. You can do what's called a handshake deal, where you come up to somebody and say, hey, I'll give you an apple for $5. You shake hands, and then you exchange the apple for $5. You just made a legally binding contract. You may not have known it, but you just did. So that is a contract. Now, if you go to court, then it's just your word against their word that's what the terms of the contract were. So it's not a very strong contract. It's not an especially useful contract, but it does have legal meaning. And if you go to court, no, like say somebody else saw it and they could be a witness and they go, yeah, the guy said he would give an apple for $5, and then they gave the apple and he didn't get $5. Well, he broke the contract, right? Of course, nobody's going to court over $5. It's way too expensive to bother with that. But at any rate, it's just important to know that a contract can be kind of any sort of agreement that is made. And those contracts are to some degree binding, but they can be very difficult to enforce if they aren't provable. So I have done deals in the past based just on an email. And so I say, well, this is what you want, and this is what I'll do, and this is how much money. Please let me know if you agree. And then we have the email. I can store that email. It's not as useful as a full binding contract because, in a sense, there's not a lot of details in there. It's pretty surface. But, for the most part, that's fine. And it has some of those other benefits that if we go back and I go, hey, look, the email that we sent back and forth, this is what you said you wanted. This is what we agreed to. That's the contract terms. So I think we should abide by those, right? Text messages, writing it down on a napkin and you both sign it, that has the advantage of having a signature on it. So it's actually even that little bit more piece of verifiable. It's another reason why emails are pretty good because, the email is going to have the person's email address and the name, and that stuff is generally publicly known, or at least it's publicly provable. So that's pretty good. So these things are okay, and you can do business that way. It's not the best way, but it is an option. All right. When you do want to make yourself an actual nice PDF style contract or written contract, I do find eSign is a really helpful little service. You just type it eSign, like E is in the letter E and sign. And you can just put a PDF up there, and then you can email somebody, and then they sign it, and you sign it, and it gets stored on that server as a public record. That way it's there You can't burn your copy of it or whatever and make it disappear. And also, there's probably still some way, but generally speaking, it's there. And so if somebody's like, I don't have my contract, you go, well, it's right over there. You get notification that it was signed and it's recorded and it goes through a little process. And so it's pretty nice. I like it. It doesn't cost you anything, generally speaking. So it's a really good, handy thing as a contractor or somebody who's doing contracting. Just so you know, contracts are civil law. So if you go to court, you're in civil court. This means one party, you and the other party, are going to say the other person owes me some money or owes me some kind of compensation, and they go back and forth like that. Nobody goes to jail, nothing like that, right? That's criminal court. So it's civil court. And I will say you can follow a contract perfectly and somebody could still take you to court. People can take you to court anytime for any reason. So just so you know, that's how that is. All right, contracts are copywritten, so don't steal somebody else's contract. Just don't go to a random website or some company sends you a contract and you're like, great, I'm going to use this contract with other people. You're not supposed to do that. Now, contract usually have a lot of what we call boilerplate, right, or standard language, and it's not like if you use a particular sentence, that's going to get you in copyright trouble when it comes to contracts. But generally speaking, you should be writing, if you're writing a contract, write the contract in your own understanding of language, or, don't copy a whole contract. You can take like, oh, this is a good expression for this sentence, but I'm going to change my company names and I'm going to do like this. And, I'm going to give it its own title for its section or whatever. Make it yours. Not every contract is going to be super different. A lot of them look like they were copy pasted. And indeed, you can buy, copyright to a standard contract on many websites and then freely use that contract for your contracting stuff. Just like you could buy a manuscript or anything else, right? It is a kind of creative work. So I think that's worth noting. You can also write your own contracts. You don't have to be a lawyer to like a contract. Like I said, you could write a contract on a napkin. Doesn't mean it's a good contract. Doesn't mean you are wise to do so. I have written my own artist contract for Sigtrink Games. That is taking some legal risks doing that because I am not a lawyer, right? So, but it's a thing you can do and you are allowed to do, and they're perfectly valid. They just might not be as wise in the ways of the law or cover all the little possibilities that can happen. So the more money you're dealing with, the bigger situation is, the better you should go get a lawyer to do these things for you. Now, I did have a family member who is a lawyer look at my contract and say, was there any big problems here? And they did find a couple things. I think I talked about that in one of these videos. Anyway, so definitely good to have a lawyer look at it, but you don't have to be a lawyer to do a contract. All right. Number 3, what should be in a contract, especially one for creative game works? Other kinds of contracts are going to have their own kind of sections. Some of these will be very common, but generally the important things that you want to see in a contract are IP rights and assignments, and this is who owns the work that is being produced, right? So like I said, in the Sigtrink Games art contract, the artist actually keeps ownership of the work. That's kind of unusual. And then a number of rights for usage of the artwork are assigned to Sigtrink Games, the company, and the things that we can do with that artwork. And they are pretty broad lists of things that we can do. But otherwise, and there are a couple of restrictions on what the artist can do with the art, even though they own it, because they're in the contract, which is they can't sell it to another game company within a certain period of time. We would like exclusive use of it within that market for a certain period of time. But I would like them to be able to use it in like a stock art portfolio in the future or something like that. And certainly to promote their own work and for their own portfolios, if they want to sell prints and all that kind of stuff, that's all theirs. Okay, so that's the IP rights and assignment. It's really important. Most contracts are going to have a lot of language about this that just go bending over backwards to say, you, the creative, own almost nothing. Then you're just giving everything to us forever, all derivatives of it, everything, we owe you nothing in the future. Pretty common. Is that egregious? Generally not. It's not like the things we generally do as a creative are so precious that we as an artist can't make more stuff of our own, right? That we can own if we want to. But you want to read that very carefully and understand what you're getting into. If you have false assumptions that you think, oh, but I drew it, so therefore I can sell it to somebody else, you're probably not. It doesn't work that way. So be sure to read those and try to understand them. Consideration and responsibilities. Considerations are basically what is being paid. That's usually the money. Responsibilities are usually the work, right? But, it can go different ways because some contracts can have people exchanging work for work or money for money or whatever it happens to be, right? But generally speaking, with these artist contracts, an artist or creative is going to do some kind of work, and then the company is going to offer some kind of money and financial compensation for it, right? So those are the considerations and responsibilities. They're often actually one of the shorter parts of the contract, but they're very important, obviously. These are the things that people often get into a dispute about. Indemnity clauses are pretty common in almost any contract. This basically says that, like, hey, look, you're saying that I'm not responsible if in the process of writing this book you break your leg because you wanted to try jet skiing in real life, and now you're going to sue me to pay for your medical bills, that kind of stuff. Like, it's basically a big clause that's just trying to say, look, the only thing that really is at stake between us is the work and the compensation, and anything else you think might be important here, no, like, that's not part of what we're doing. So that's indemnity, and it's to try and limit the risk and exposure of both parties. Well, sometimes only one party, but ideally for both parties. Sometimes you'll have dispute resolution clauses that are associated with that, and that's like, hey, if we end up disagreeing about this contract in some way, we agree to try not to spend bazillions of dollars, so maybe we'll go to arbitration before we go to court, et cetera, et cetera. You can't waive away, like, legally all your legal rights, but you can certainly limit them down to a certain scope. And so that's what those do. And again, it's just to try and minimize risk for contracts, especially in our business. Usually the dollar amounts are small enough that it's not usually worth going to court over them, even if you feel like you got a dispute of some kind. And so these things make it a little more possible to do that without people spending a lot of money. So that can be a good thing. Contingencies. These are sort of like, hey, look, if one party cancels or if for some reason the person can't deliver on the thing, here's what happens, right? Do you get a partial payment? Is there a thing? Or is the contract just null and void? Nobody owes any money, but you get to keep your work. Whatever the case may be, you're just sort of trying to cover the off cases that might come up, and things do come up, so it's nice to have some contingencies like that that explains what the procedure is supposed to be. Finally, you're going to have attachments. Basically what happens is you get kind of a standard contract, but then the exact amount that you're going to pay and exactly the thing that you're going to get, those change a lot, right? It might be different with every contract. So you can have an attachment, and the main contract says, you know, the compensation, considerations, responsibilities as described in the attachment A, and then you go to look at attachment A, and then it has the specifics about what you're going to be doing. Very standard. It just makes it easy to have one contract, use it over and over, and then just change that attachment part for each person that you're working with. So there you go. Make sure that the attachment, the contract has your name. Often a person's address will be in there just to verify that it is that person with that name, because many people can have the same name, etc. So to resolve any of the kinds of disputes, so name and address of the parties in the contract, very important. Those usually go up at the top somewhere. And then the rest of the contract probably doesn't really mention them, or it says like the assignee or the assigner. It'll give a little title or the company or something, so that you don't have to write those names over and over again through the whole thing. All right, so that's what you can expect to see in a contract. Be sure to read your contracts. Now, this is an area where AI might actually be pretty useful. You can ask it to try and summarize portions of a contract. If it's written in complex legalese, and they most often are, it can be pretty hard to read unless you're used to that kind of language and you have a pretty good vocabulary for legal expressions. Even then, you might not understand why or what all this stuff is in there for. I often don't. But, you should try to muscle through it, or get advice from somebody, or Google stuff, or use AI. It's pretty easy to learn and to come to understand these things, so that you know what it is you're signing. At least in general terms, you get an idea. Because a bunch of stuff might be probably useless. It's just all edge case stuff to prevent big problems from happening that have happened in the past to other people, right? So you don't want those. All right. But you do want to understand it, because it is possible to sign a contract that's a really terrible deal, and you just don't want to do that. If you do have any concerns about the contract, you should definitely express them to the person who is offering it to you. It's not common. Now, you can always amend contracts. So you can get a contract and you can just take a marker and you can write over the parts you don't like, so long as both people see that and agree to it and sign it, right? So it's possible to modify contracts. I think most people who are going to offer you a writer's contract in this business did not slave over that contract. They did not try to put sneaky loopholes in it. They're just trying to use something to cover everybody's butt and make sure everybody delivers what they promised and gets paid what they're promised. And so a lot of fiddling around with fine details in the language, people are not going to want to do that. They're going to be like, it's not worth it. I'll find somebody who can sign it, right? But you don't want to sign something that's really egregious, like everything you've ever written in your life belongs to us now. Well, that would be terrible. Don't sign a contract like that. Or every future work you ever write belongs. No, like just the work that's being delivered should be at issue there and stuff. So do read it, do pay attention to those things. But generally speaking, people are not going to want to dicker over contracts too much. But it can happen. If you were talking about big amounts of money, then it may well be worth the time to do so. All right, get a sense of any restrictions on your actions. A lot of contracts might have confidentiality agreements, so be sure to be careful about those and to say what it is that you're not supposed to say. They'll often say, well, you can't do it without permission, so if there's something that you want to talk about, which is why I don't talk about some of my contract jobs here until I've gotten permission from the people who I'm contracting with to talk about them, right? Not because I don't think they would want me to talk about it or it's necessarily been told to me as a big secret, but generally speaking, hold things in confidence unless you know that it's okay to talk about them, right? And that's the way most contracts are written. They can be sometimes excessive in these confidentiality things. I think they can be excessive, but usually I'll agree, and it doesn't cost you anything to keep your mouth shut, right? So usually I don't worry about it too much, but maybe you can be careful. I'm always wary of something that says like, I can't talk about the fact that I have this contract or something, and that's kind of problematic because actually you have to report to the government when you're going to make money and things like that, so you can't be entirely silent about some things. It doesn't really make sense, but again, generally try to follow those terms. All right, keep a copy of your contract. It's really important. If you have one, put it somewhere that you will not accidentally get rid of it. Make a paper copy if that's good for you and put it in a filing cabinet if that's what you've got, or put it on your computer in a file system somewhere where you can find it. Give the file a title that when you want to search for it, that it would come up. Like, oh, this is a contract with Blue Peanut Games for the Riviera Adventure. Put that in the title. That way, if you need to find that file, you can find the file. If it's called Contract 6, or CTR 6 or something, like it's never going to come up. You're going to lose it forever. It'll be terrible. So don't do that. If you have any kind of dispute and you're like, I didn't get paid what I was supposed to get paid, or they're saying I need to do this thing and I don't think I need to do it, go look at your contract first. Like, it's there as a reference to see what deal you actually made. It's easy to forget what the deal was when it comes down to specifics. So be sure and go to do that, and don't be angry if somebody gets it kind of wrong in the contract, but do point it out to them. You're like, well, you said I owe you this, but the contract does not include that, so I'm sorry, but I don't owe that to you. However, we can come to some terms and we can do that. So yeah, that's my contract advice. Probably more than most people ever need to know, maybe, I don't know, but less if you're a lawyer. So, okay, moving on. What have I been playing this week? A lot of stuff, a lot of little things this week. I played Dungeons & Dragons Online a bit, running the Maybar event, which is like a Halloween event in Dungeons & Dragons Online. It was really good for leveling my what we call heroic level characters. That's level 1 to 20. That game, they go up to like 34, I think. Pretty crazy. But those characters, because I'm not subscribed to the game right now, get reduced experience points in other quests, and they can only play on certain difficulty levels, but these special events are structured a little differently, and so I could get a lot more XP on them. So I've been playing my heroic characters to get a little cheap XP, as it were, running Maybar. Plus, you get to turn in for some cool like cosmetic stuff at the end. So, yeah, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Not that I advocate any bird killing. I like birds. They're generally nice. So, gently massaging 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't know. All right. Shadows Awakening. Now, this is a game I just randomly picked off my Steam list. I don't know when I got it. I don't think I ever paid for it. I think it came in a bundle of games. But I was just like, what's something that doesn't look like it's a lot of commitment I can play for an hour or two and see what it's like? So Shadows Awakening is like a Diablo-ish kind of a game. It's a, action RPG game. It's set in its own fictional world. It has a cool mechanic where, like, the story is, like, this guy, this powerful wizard, summons a demon, and then he has the demon choose the soul of one of 3 heroes, and then he binds, and you're playing, ostensibly, I guess, the hero and the demon. And so they're one soul, and so there's like a shadowy demon world, and then there's a real world. And so when you're in the real world, you're the hero, and when you're in the shadow world, you're the demon, and maps switch back and forth. At any time, you can swap back and forth. So you can be in the middle of a fight, shooting your arrow at some imps, and then pop into the demon world, and then now you're a demon, and the imps are like frozen in time, but there's ghosts there that you could fight. and maybe you can have an open passage. So if you move into the other room and then switch back again, the archer is suddenly over in that other room, so it can kind of teleport through walls. And sometimes you have to fight things on both sides, and like so you stun them on the shadow side, and you flip over the real side and shoot them, but they stay stunned even though it gets interesting. So definitely kind of a cool game, and I guess I'm going to get more characters so that you can switch between like 3 or 4 different guys and switch their powers out, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Is it a super exciting game? It's not my kind of game. I don't play these kind of games a lot, but I thought it was interesting. And yeah, I'll give it a recommendation. It's kind of worth playing if it's not too expensive and you like that kind of game. It's pretty clever. All right, Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era Demo. I think I only played for like 2 hours. I love Heroes of Might and Magic. I was playing Heroes of Might and Magic 3 a couple weeks ago. So far, this is pretty good. It's like a new one that's going to be coming out. The graphics, really nice. I think it feels pretty refined compared to Heroes of Might and Magic 3, but then really similar. The only thing I say, the map is really cluttered with icons. There's a whole lot going on. And apparently I'm not very good at it because even though I set it just like kind of slightly hard, averagey difficulty, I was clucking along thinking I was pretty good. And then all of a sudden an enemy hero showed up with like 5 times my army and just wiped me out. And I was like, oh, I am apparently not doing very well. I thought I was doing good, and apparently I am not. So I have much to learn in the ways of olden era Heroes of Might and Magic. But oh, it was pretty cool. Definitely check it out. It was free. It's free on Steam. So the demo, that is. And it seems like a good demo. You can play some complete games. You get 4 out of the 6 factions that you can play with. So it seems pretty cool. All right, finally, real-life tabletop RPG. I played a game of Traveler. We made characters last week. And this week we played our first game. This is from Mongoose Publishing. Is it Mongoose Publishing? I'm not sure. I usually just say Mongoose. Anyway, Traveler is a very old school RPG. It's one of the earliest science fiction RPGs. I would say it's like hard sci-fi RPG. It's not like space fantasy kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. Making characters is amazing because basically you go through your character's career. You know, if you think about the profession system in Everyday Heroes, it's like that, but it's a mini game that you play. Where you roll dice and you see how your career path. Did you get a promotion? No, or did you lose your job? No, you were fired. Now you got to go work in a penal colony. Like all kinds of crazy stuff can happen. It's pretty fun, and there's all kinds of different career paths. So it's pretty cool. You can even get old age, and you could die in character creation, right? If you really push things. So it's pretty neat. I liked it a lot. So the game master did limit us to like sort of 4 tours of duty, as it were, when making characters. So the best we could get is rank 3 in whatever our professions were. But that's all good. And then we started playing. It's pretty cool. It's a 2d6 system, but it uses the 2d6 very similar to the way you would use a d20. There's definitely different rules. Like if you roll really high to hit, that does extra damage. Which is pretty interesting. It's a fairly lethal system, so pretty easy to get killed in Traveler, although it depends on what you're doing. The book is kind of like, hey, like if you're just shooting lasers at everybody, you're probably not playing Traveler right, because, you know, it's a good way to get killed. I mean, it doesn't say that you can't play that way, right? But it's sort of like, yeah, if you could talk your way out of a situation, that might be better than shooting lasers at them, because if you're in a ship, all that ship damage is going to be very expensive, and if you're not in a ship, you might die. So I think it's pretty cool. We, of course, immediately got into a giant gang war fight in the game that we were playing in our first session, so, you know, maybe we're a little foolish. And I really like my character. He's really fun to play so far. He's kind of the bard of the group, you might say. Very much a talky character, not much of a fighter. But I traded a few laser blasts while we were playing. Nomad Ann, what has she been playing over on her Twitch channel? Phasmophobia Blood Moon. So Phasmophobia is a Halloween special. It is a horror game, so of course it has a Halloween event. It is like the Blood Moon event, and the houses are all dressed up really spooky with runes and curtains and other strange things, and you go around collecting artifacts. And it's a cool game that they have the community events, so everybody in the community contributes points towards unlocking badges and awards and stuff that people can have, or unlocks the ability to personally upgrade your badges and things. You get a shiny badge, stuff like that. So pretty cool community involvement. I think that's pretty neat. So I played a little bit yesterday with Anne on that, but mostly she's doing that one. And Phasmophobia is a fun game. We've talked about it before. Well worth checking out if you haven't played and you like ghost hunting type stuff. Life in general. There's not been a lot going on, like just a lot of work, right? So both working in the gift shop and working at home. I'm a little tired, but not super tired, just like a little bit, you know. So feeling some pressure, financial and all that as usual, because that's life, but nothing exceptional. But I have plenty of hope. Also, this week, just got back this morning from watching Tron Ares, and that was really good. I liked it a lot. The soundtrack, amazing from Nine Inch Nails. Lots of 80s callbacks and references, and that's when I grew up playing video games, so that stuff works on me like a charm. A lot of praise for Depeche Mode, you know, which is a great band, granted, and callbacks to the other Tron movies, even though the story kind of doesn't have a lot to do with it. And like all Tron movies, the visuals are kind of amazing and really cool if you like computer graphics type stuff and cool things like screensaver graphics and whatnot. Like, really cool visuals, really cool sound, especially in the second and third movies. That's great. First movie, I don't really remember the soundtrack very much, but anyway. But the world of Tron makes no sense. You kind of have to just, especially if you know anything about computers, you have to check your brain at the door, leave that puppy out in the rain, come back to it later, because it's all going to be kind of nonsense. But if you just go, okay, sure, whatever you say technically is possible, then the story's easy to follow and it's pretty fun. It's good guys versus bad guys. It's fairly straightforward. Acting is pretty good. Not any super standout performances, and that's also kind of typical of a Tron movie. I mean, as great as Jeff Bridges is, and as cool as all the movies were, like, it's not what they're known for, but visuals, sound effects, and just a basic story that you can follow along and watch. It's good. I liked it. Also started watching Westworld Season 4, which came out a long time ago, but I haven't got around to. Anne loves Westworld. I really love Westworld, too. I think it's amazing. I'm not quite as deep in the lore as she is. And I watched a little show about it on YouTube, and I was like, oh, I never watched Season 4. I got to watch that. So I've been watching Season 4, and yeah, pretty good. The first episode kind of lost me, and it was a little dull because I didn't know what was going on. It's one of those ones where, like, ooh, check out all the mystery. Like, you'd have no idea what's going on, and you're like, yes, I have no idea what's going on. I kind of wish I did. So now it's been a while since I watched Season 3, so part of that's on me. But then as it moves into episode 2 and on, it all picks up and they resolve most of that. And so then you're like, okay, I get the sense of what the stakes and the motivations are. Great. I can kind of invest in the characters again and get going. And it's pretty cool so far. I like it a lot. And it's always just so beautifully shot. I mean, it's a TV show that looks like a movie, as I suppose many TV shows do these days. But really beautiful. And sometimes you're just like, wow, they spent so much money just on this one throwaway scene. I can't believe it. So really good stuff. Definitely check out if you've never watched any of Westworld. Season 1, oh my god, amazing. Season 2, very good. Season 3 is like Blade Runner. It's like a totally different show almost, but it's still really cool. So definitely worth checking out. Okay, that's it for me this week. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. We will see you on episode 37 next Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever you decide to check it out. Bye-bye.